Julian Hart trusted numbers more than people. Numbers did not lie to you, and they did not smile at you while they planned to leave. A beam either held or it didn't. A wall was either plumb or it wasn't. People, on the other hand, could look you straight in the eye and still be lying. He had learned that the hard way, and he had built his whole quiet life in Cambria around never learning it again. He was 35 years old, and most people in town knew him as the piano teacher above Sam Delaney's music shop. That was all anyone in Cambria really knew about him. He liked it that way. Grace Winslow walked into that shop on a Tuesday afternoon, looking for information about an old building her family's company wanted to tear down. She was 31. She wore a sharp blazer that didn't belong in a beach town. She carried herself like someone used to being listened to. Her family owned Winslow Properties, one of the biggest real estate firms in San Francisco. She had grown up around men in suits who measured people by their net worth. She didn't think she'd judge people that way. She was wrong, but she didn't know that yet. The town itself seemed to slow her down the moment she stepped out of the car. Cambria smelled like salt and pine, not like glass towers and cold coffee. She had expected to spend 3 or 4 days here, sign some papers, shake some hands, and fly home. She did not expect the town to hold on to her the way it did. "I'm looking for someone who knows the history of the old Coast building," she said to Sam, who was behind the counter restringing a guitar. Sam tipped his head toward the back room. A small boy was picking out a scale on the piano badly. A man sat next to him, watching with a patience that looked almost like meditation. The man didn't rush the boy. He didn't correct every wrong note. He just waited, hands folded loosely in his lap, like time wasn't something he needed to protect. "That's Julian," Sam said. "He'd know the building better than anyone in town, if he feels like talking about it." Why wouldn't he feel like it? Sam just shrugged and went back to his guitar strings. The way people do when they've decided a question isn't theirs to answer. Grace waited until the lesson ended. The boy laughed, clutching a candy Julian had slipped him from a drawer. Grace introduced herself. Julian shook her hand once, briefly, and looked somewhere past her shoulder instead of at her face. His grip was firm but quick, like a man closing a door before anyone could see inside. "So you teach music here," she said. "Full time." There was a small edge in the question, the kind people don't always hear themselves make. Julian heard it. He'd heard it before from other people in other rooms. "Full time," he said. "Yes." He didn't offer anything else. His fingers tapped once, lightly, against the edge of the piano, like a man checking that something was still steady before he let go of it. Then he told her, in short sentences, that he didn't really know much about the Coast building, and that she should try the town archive instead. It wasn't true. He knew everything about that building. He just didn't want to talk about it yet. She came back a week later. She told herself it was for the project. It wasn't only that. She found him on the pier at sunset, sitting with his arms folded over the railing, looking at the water like it owed him something. She sat down next to him before she could think better of it. "The building," she said. "You said you didn't know much." "I don't think that was true." Julian didn't answer right away. Then something in him loosened, like a knot finally coming undone. "It was built in 1911, he said, by a woman named Esther Calloway. Nobody remembers her now, which is a shame, because she was better than most of the men who got remembered instead." Once he started, he couldn't stop. His hands came alive, shaping the roofline in the air between them. He explained how Calloway had studied the way the Chumash people built along this coast. They faced their structures into the wind. They used stone that was already in the ground, instead of hauling something foreign in. Calloway's building did the same thing. Low walls, deep eaves, a roof that seemed to breathe with the sea air instead of fighting it. "You don't build on top of the land," he said, leaning forward, eyes bright in a way Grace hadn't seen from him before. "You build with it. That's the whole difference." Most people forget that a place already knows how to hold itself up before you ever show up with a blueprint. Most modern buildings fight the land, he went on. They flatten a hill instead of following its shape. They fight the wind instead of using it. Callaway didn't do that. She let the site tell her where the walls should go. How do you know all this? Grace asked. This isn't the kind of thing you pick up from a library book. Grace watched him. This wasn't the guarded man from the music shop. His shoulders were back. His voice had lost its careful flatness. For the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong about him. And wrong, maybe, in a way that embarrassed her a little. Then, mid-sentence, he stopped. Just stopped, like someone had cut a wire. Why'd you stop? She asked. Julian looked down at his hands. I used to talk like this for a living, he said. I forget sometimes that I'm not supposed to anymore. He didn't explain. Grace didn't push. But she carried that sentence home with her, turning it over like a stone in her pocket. The town's coastal permit office moved slower than anyone expected, and Grace's short work trip stretched into weeks. She told her parents it was the paperwork. That was true. It just wasn't the only true thing. She started showing up at the music shop on Thursdays, asking Julian to teach her piano. She was terrible at it, and she didn't care. One afternoon, while she was fumbling through a simple chord progression, her fingers landed on something that almost sounded like a real song. 4 notes, nothing special, the kind of pattern half the songs in the world use. Julian's hand, which had been reaching to correct her posture, froze completely above the keys. For a second his face went pale, like all the blood had quietly left it. Then he blinked, and the color came back, and he smiled too quickly. Wrong hand position, he said, and moved on, his voice a little too light. Grace didn't ask, but she filed the moment away, the way you remember a door you're not ready to open yet. You're doing that thing again, he told her a few weeks later, where you rush the easy part because you're scared of the hard part. I do not do that, she said. You do. Watch. He reached over and moved her hand slightly on the keys, 2 fingers guiding 2 of hers into place. It was a small touch, barely a second long, and neither of them said anything about it. But the air in the room felt different after that. She laughed, a little embarrassed, and her shoulders dropped in a way they never did around her family. How are you this patient? She asked. You look exhausted half the time you're teaching that kid his scales. Julian thought about it before answering, which was something she noticed he always did. He never gave you the fast answer, only the true one. Not everything that's slow to build is weak, he said. Some things need the time. He wasn't only talking about piano, and they both knew it. Driving back to the rented house that night, Grace found herself smiling for no reason she could name. She tried to remember the last time a man had made her feel this way. Not impressed, not flattered, just calm, like she didn't have to perform anything. The men she usually met came with resumes attached, introducing themselves by what they'd built or bought or closed. Julian never once told her what he was. He just showed her, quietly, patiently, the way he was with people who needed extra time. She was starting to think that was worth more than any title. She didn't say any of this out loud. She wasn't ready to. Near the end of the first month, Grace's parents came down to check on the project, and Grace made the mistake of inviting Julian to dinner. Richard Winslow was quiet in the particular way powerful men are quiet, watching, deciding, saying little. Diane Winslow was not quiet at all, though she was careful to sound pleasant while she cut. And what did you study, Julian? Diane asked, smiling over her wine glass. Before music? Julian turned his glass slowly by the stem, buying himself a second. A few different things, he said. Nothing worth talking about at dinner. How mysterious, Diane said, in a tone that meant the opposite. And you just stopped, whatever it was. Something like that. Well, Diane said, setting her glass down with a small, precise click, I suppose not every building gets finished. She mentioned, almost in passing, the name of a family friend. He had just been made partner at a design firm in the city. Right degree, right office, right life. She never looked at Julian while she said it. She didn't have to. Grace felt her own face go hot. Under the table, she reached for Julian's knee just to let him know someone in the room was on his side. Then she smiled again, gentler this time, which somehow made it worse. There's a certain peace, I imagine, she said, in choosing a life with lower stakes. Not everyone needs to build an empire. Julian didn't answer. He set his fork down slowly, carefully, lining it up exactly parallel to his knife. It looked like the smallest details were the only thing keeping his hands from shaking. Grace saw it. She saw the two careful hands, the jaw set tight, the silence that wasn't peaceful at all. She opened her mouth to say something. Julian gave the smallest shake of his head, barely there, asking her not to. So she stayed quiet and hated herself a little for it. That night, after her parents had gone to bed, Grace found Julian sitting on the stone steps of the old Coast building, alone, looking up at the way some people look at a photograph of someone they miss. She sat down next to him without asking. "I'm sorry about my mother," she said. "You don't have to apologize for her." "I know. I'm doing it anyway." They sat in silence for a while. The building loomed over them, dark and patient. "You said something once," Grace said carefully, "that you used to build things. What happened?" Julian didn't look at her. He looked at the building instead and reached out to touch the stone wall beside him, running his palm slowly over its surface, like he was checking it was still real. "I built something," he said. "Not just a building, a whole future with someone. Then someone else redesigned it without telling me. By the time I found out, it was too late to fix any of it." His voice had gone very quiet, almost flat, the way people talk when they're trying hard not to feel what they're saying. "I don't know how to explain it without sounding like I'm still standing in the wreckage," he said. "So I stopped trying to explain it. I just stopped building." Grace didn't say anything wise. She didn't try to fix it. She just sat closer until her shoulder was nearly touching his, and for one unguarded second, she let her head rest against him. Then she caught herself and sat up straight again, cheeks warm, unsure if she'd done something wrong. Julian didn't pull away. That, more than anything he'd said all night, told her something. "People assume a building's value is in what it can become," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's in what it already survived." The call came the next week. The design firm hired to consult on the resort project was Lang and Associates. Theodore Lang himself was coming down to walk the site, along with his lead designer. Julian didn't know until the car doors were already closing in the gravel lot. He looked up, and his breath caught somewhere in his chest, small, almost invisible, but Grace, standing beside him, felt him go still in a way she now knew to recognize. Theodore Lang stepped out first, gray-haired, sure of himself in the way of men who had never once had to doubt their own name. And behind him, Isabel. She looked exactly the same. That was somehow the worst part. Same walk, same way of tucking her hair behind one ear before she spoke, like she was about to say something important. Julian had once thought that gesture was the most honest thing about her. He knew better now. "Julian," she said, walking over with a smile that had no weight to it all. "It's been a long time. You look well." "You too," he said, because it was easier than saying anything true. His hands, which had been loose at his sides, curled slowly into fists inside his jacket pockets, small enough that no one else would notice, but Grace was close enough to see the fabric pull tight. "Long enough," he said. Theodore clapped Julian on the shoulder like nothing had ever happened between them, and gestured at the old building like a man admiring something he already planned to buy. "The Big Sur Library still gets photographed for design journals, you know," Theodore said almost fondly. "Though, of course, most people credit the firm now, not the original architect." The words landed and sat there. Grace watched Julian's face go very still, the way water goes still right before it freezes. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Julian said, quietly, without any heat in his voice at all, "I know. I still have the drawings. The real ones. With my handwriting in the margins." He paused. Funny thing about paper. It doesn't forget who held the pencil, even when people do. Isabel's smile faltered, just slightly, before she recovered it. Richard Winslow, who had walked up in time to hear the last part, looked between Julian and Theodore with new interest. "A Pacific Coast Prize," he said slowly. "Why didn't you say something sooner, son?" Julian turned to him, calm, and there was something almost merciful in how quietly he said it. "I didn't hide it because I was ashamed of the prize, Richard," he said. "I hid it because I was ashamed of what happened after." Grace had heard enough. She stepped forward, closer to Julian than to her own father, and when she spoke, her voice didn't shake at all. "Funny," she said, looking at Theodore. "My family hired your firm because they said you have an eye for authentic design." She glanced at Julian. "I'm standing next to the man who actually has one." Nobody said anything for a moment. Theodore's smile went thin. Isabel looked at the ground, and Julian looked at Grace like he was seeing something he hadn't let himself hope for in a very long time. That night, Grace found her mother in the kitchen of the rented house and finally said what she'd been holding back for weeks. "You judge people by what they own," Grace said, "and what school put their name on a wall somewhere. You called Julian's life small. He's the most honest person I've ever met. And Theodore Lang, who you were so impressed by tonight, built half his career on someone else's work." Diane's hand went to the pearls at her throat, turning them slowly between her fingers. She didn't have an answer ready. That, for Diane, was rare. "I didn't raise you to talk to me like this," Diane finally said. "No," Grace said. "You raised me to think like this. I just finally stopped." Diane looked at her daughter for a long moment, and something in her face shifted, not quite an apology, but not nothing either. "You care about him," she said. It wasn't a question. "Ido." "Then I suppose I'll have to get used to that," Diane said quietly, and turned back to the sink, done with the conversation, but not, Grace thought, done thinking about it. Grace didn't sleep much that night. She lay awake going over the day, and underneath the anger she'd felt toward Theodore, toward her mother, toward all of it, was something smaller and more confusing. She didn't know how to feel about Julian anymore. Not that she loved him less. If anything, it was the opposite, and that scared her more. She had fallen for a quiet man who fixed a small boy's finger position on a piano and asked for nothing back. Now that man had a prize with his name on it. He had a career other architects still talked about. He had a life he could have walked back in any time he wanted. In the dark, she caught herself wondering something hard. Was the Julian she loved, patient, unhurried, content with a little shop above a music store, even real? Or had she only gotten the parts of him he'd let survive? She hated the question the moment she asked it. It sounded too much like her mother. By morning, she had turned it over enough times to know the answer, even if she hadn't said it to anyone yet. It didn't matter what Julian used to build. It didn't matter what he could go back to building. What mattered was how he'd chosen to live once nobody was watching. Patient with a child who couldn't keep time. Honest with a woman who'd once asked him, without meaning to be cruel, if his job was real. That was the man she loved. The prize was just proof that he'd once been brave. It wasn't the reason. 2 weeks later, Julian stood in front of the town council with a folder of drawings he hadn't opened in 5 years. His hands were steady this time. He didn't talk about himself, or about Theodore, or about anything that had happened to him. He talked about the building. He proposed restoring it instead of tearing it down. Keep Esther Calloway's bones intact. Keep her stone walls, her low roof line that had survived 100 years of storms. Add just enough new structure to let it serve the town for 100 more. "We don't always have to knock something down to build it back up," he told the council. and his voice, for once, didn't waver at all. The vote passed by a wide margin. Grace, sitting in the back row, clapped harder than anyone. On her last night in Cambria, Grace found Julian at the same stone steps where he'd first told her the truth about himself. Tomorrow morning, she would drive back to San Francisco, back to her father's office and her mother's dinners and a life that suddenly felt smaller than it used to. Neither of them said anything for a while. The building stood in front of them, scaffolding already going up along one side, the first sign of the restoration to come. Somewhere down the beach, a dog barked twice and went quiet. The wind off the water was cool, and Grace pulled her sleeves down over her hands without really noticing she'd done it. "I used to think I was like this place," Julian finally said. "Something people decided wasn't worth saving. So I closed myself off, boarded up the windows, so to speak. I stopped letting anyone in far enough to find out what was still standing underneath." His hand, resting against the cool stone wall beside him, trembled slightly. A small thing, but Grace noticed it, because by now she noticed everything about him. Grace took a breath. There was something she needed to say first, before he said whatever he was working up to. "I have to tell you something," she said. "The night everyone found out who you really were, the prize, the drawings, all of it, I couldn't sleep. I kept asking myself if I'd fallen for a man who didn't exist. Like maybe I only loved the version of you that fixed pianos and forgot to tell anyone he used to be brilliant." She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "It scared me. I hated that it scared me, because it meant I was still measuring you the way my family does, even after everything I said to my mother." Julian didn't say anything. He just watched her, waiting, the way he always did when something mattered. "But I figured it out," Grace said. "It was never the prize. I don't care about the prize. I care about the man who was patient with a kid who couldn't keep a beat, who never once tried to impress me, who told me the truth about a building before he ever told me the truth about himself, because the building was easier to trust with it." Her voice caught just slightly. "I love you for what you chose to be when nobody was watching, Julian, not for what you used to be able to prove. You're the first person who made me think about opening the door again," he said. His voice had gone soft, unguarded, nothing like the careful flatness he used with strangers. "I'm not good at this. I haven't been good at this in a long time. But I love you too. I think I have for weeks. I just didn't trust myself to say it out loud." Grace didn't answer right away. She looked at the old building, and then back at him. "You told me once that a building's value isn't just in what it can become," she said. "It's in what it already survived." She reached for his hand, the one still resting against the stone, and held it. "I think that's you, Julian. I think you survived something, and you're still standing, and I don't want to look at anything else." He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. They stood there together in the dark, her hand in his, the old building rising quietly behind them. Not torn down, not abandoned, just waiting patiently to be built back up, one honest wall at a time.